You know, at one point, a couple years ago, Luke came up to me and said, "Stephen, would you ever consider becoming a priest?" And I said, "No, absolutely not." And now I'm number two here preaching after the clergy. It's funny how that works. But, you know, one of the reasons why I said no, I wouldn't do that, was because I felt I was in the right place. And while I could see myself in that role, I really felt that my calling was where I am right now. And in many ways, the same thing that you do here with our congregation is what I try to do with the people in our community who are experiencing mental illness and substance use disorders. So I think I'm in the right place. So I am the executive director of the Mental Health Association. Mental Health Association is, if you don't know this, is somewhat of a unique organization. We're a peer-run organization. We don't provide any clinical services, but we focus on the recovery side of what people need to get better. Everyone who works at the Mental Health Association has what we call lived recovery experiences. So all of us are in recovery or have supported people in recovery or are doing both, and that makes us very unique. Luke mentioned I'm a parishioner here. I'm also part of the vestry here. Very proud of that role too. And so balancing all of those hats, there's at least three there, I think. I feel it's really important to welcome you all here no matter where you are. If you're an Episcopalian, or if you're a Catholic, or a Baptist, or a Jew, or a Muslim, or a Taoist, or a Buddhist, or a non-believer, or someone who just doesn't have any faith anymore because you've just been worn out. You're welcome here. We're here to create community, and thanks for joining us. There's no litmus test. So today is the first day of Overdose Awareness Week in the United States. Overdose Awareness Week, obviously, the highlight of the week will be on the 31st of August, which is Overdose Awareness Day in the United States, where we remember those who have passed from drug overdose. So drug overdose deaths in the United States in 2020 rose 29.4% to approximately 93,331 people in our country who died of an overdose. And right here in Chautauqua County, the data that we use to track that shows that Chautauqua County experienced a 54% increase in non-fatal overdoses from 2019 to 2020. And during that same time frame, overdose fatalities rose 18%, from 33 in 2019 to 39 in 2020. And so far this year, there are 15 designated overdose fatalities in Chautauqua County, although that number will certainly rise because to verify that somebody has died of an overdose, there's a medical procedure involved in that. And yeah, those numbers are going to stop anyone in their tracks. They stopped me in my tracks. I'm never happy getting up in front of a bunch of people, whether it's a church or whether it's people who I work with, and talk about those numbers, because they're not getting better. But whenever I talk about those numbers to anyone, I've made a commitment to myself to never end the conversation with those numbers. I'd be doing a great service to everyone in our community who's working to lower those numbers if I didn't finish the sentence. So in Chautauqua County at this point last year, Chautauqua County got out through an amazing community effort over 10,000 units of Narcan to the residents of Chautauqua County. Some of that we did at the MHA, some of that was done through fire departments, some of it was done through our friends at Evergreen Health. Some of it that was done through police agencies and first responders. It's great that we're getting that out in the community. And in many areas, we've embraced the concept of harm reduction. That harm reduction is this concept that any small positive step that you make towards getting better as it relates to your substance use disorder is a victory. And we're going to celebrate that, and we're going to support you on that path. And that's in opposition to a traditional outlook that we've held, which still has its place, that we expect everyone to immediately stop using everything. That's not realistic, and it's not respectful of the people who we work with. Now, we often want that to be the end goal, but that can't be the first goal for most people. We've got peers branching out all over our community through the Mental Health Association and through other agencies, through Chautauqua County Mental Health, through recovery options made easy. Just at the MHA, we have peers in the Chautauqua County Jail. We have peers in family court. We have peers working with people who come into CPS where most of the case where the moms or the parents have been using substances. And this is great because we're meeting people where they're at. And cooperation between law enforcement and first responders and treatment professionals and recovery professionals like myself is at an all-time high in our county. And we're getting together and we're listening to each other. And that's how we begin to make progress. And in some sense, treatment is actually easier to get connected to than ever before. At the Mental Health Association, I'm really proud of the fact that we've developed some relationships with rehabs in our community and our surrounding community so that if somebody comes to us on a day, maybe even in the morning, we're often able to have them in a bed in a rehab by the end of that same day. And that's huge. And that's taken a lot of work for us to get to that point, but that's what happens when we all come together and, as we say in the treatment field, get out of our silos and not just focus on what we're doing and work with everyone else. And awareness of addiction at the public level is deeper than it's ever been. I'm going to point out a couple things. The President of the United States, his son, has experienced a very severe substance use disorder. So it's firsthand for him. Our new governor, Kathy Hochul, her nephew died of an opioid overdose about 6 years ago. So it's firsthand for her. Our county executive, PJ Wendell, is a volunteer fireman and first responder for the Lakewood Fire Department. I've had repeated conversations with PJ about the impact of overdoses and how he sees that and experiences that when responding to those. It's wonderful to have leaders who we turn to that really begin to understand. When I was looking at the readings today, it's hard not to notice the hypocrites being called out in all those readings. There's an element of that in every one of those readings. And they're being called out in a very public way. And who doesn't love to see a hypocrite called out in a very public way? It's so satisfying. And I think when I find myself slipping into hypocrisy, and I do from time to time, we all do, we're all human, that's part of the human experience. What's really happening at that point is my heart is just closing down, and it's focusing on myself, and it's focusing internally. I did a lot of reading over the past couple days about the gospel reading, and Charles Hoffaker, an Episcopal priest, writes about today's readings that the real issue in the readings is that people's hearts are just so far from a spiritual place. They're far from God. And like a beam, he cuts right to the real issue that their hearts are far from God. And he went on to write that when we talk about Christian devotion, what that means is it's meant to help us gain and maintain a new heart. And this was news to me. So it was really exciting for me to read this, at least this perspective. So all of that stuff that we do to get close to God, through our prayers, through our rosaries, through our communion practice, through our songs, what that is to allow us to maintain or have an open heart. A heart of flesh rather than a heart of stone. A heart that's alive, that's not dead. A heart that's compassionate and not selfish. And a heart that's large and not small. A heart that's hospitable and not judgmental. Christian devotion in its myriad of forms is all about softening the heart, preventing it from becoming hard, keeping it tender. So when I read that, I was kind of struck by the fact that what we do at the Mental Health Association as coaches is to have a healthy heart. And all of the things that I teach my coaches to do is to have a healthy and open heart and to not be hypocrites. And it's so easy sometimes to be a hypocrite. I think we don't even realize, I don't even realize it sometimes. I've seen myself, stepped outside of myself and saw myself in conversation with somebody who I'm working for, asking them and putting demands on them to achieve things that are just unrealistic for them where they're at. And at that point, I realize my heart is closed down because I'm not where they're at. My heart became stone, and that prevents me from being in connection with somebody. And I'm going to remind you that the opposite of addiction is community and connection. Father Luke always reminds us that really why we're here at church is to create community, is to look for opportunities to create community. So I know we pay attention to this at the MHA, and I also have to suggest and ask you to look and wonder if you need to pay attention to that at this particular point of where we are as a community and as a culture. Our politics and our public discourse are nothing less than rancid. Are you vaccinated or aren't you vaccinated? Should we wear a mask or shouldn't we wear a mask? Are you Republican or are you Democrat? And the pandemic has helped us get to that point because we've been so separate from people. When we think about that, it begs us to ask the question, what is the condition of our heart? Is there room to create connections? It was about 13 years ago, and I was in New York City, which was my home at that time, and I was living on the edge of homelessness. I was a very active IV drug user. I had infections all through, well, in my arms from IV drug use. I had collapsed most of the veins in my arms, so it was very difficult for me to get high, even though I desperately needed to get high 2 to 3 times a day. And I was destroying my arm by digging in my arm with a needle to find a place where I could connect to a vein and get high. And I had been bouncing in and out of treatment centers in New York City, and I was difficult, I'll tell you guys. There's no other word to describe it. I was difficult. And every treatment center that I went to, I ended up being discharged because I kept showing up high. And I have to tell you that those folks at that point at those treatment centers had a closed heart. And I don't mean an overall critical accusation for those folks, because it's tough what they do. It's tough to work in this business of helping people who have substance use disorders. It's hard, and we get tired, and our hearts close. And those folks who I were encountering, their hearts were closed. And I didn't quite know where to turn. And one of my friends at the time, who was somebody who I got high with, directed me to a place that was called the Positive Health Project. And the focus of this project was to keep people who use substances free from HIV. And they did that by distributing needles, talking about vein care, giving people food, smiling at people, listening to people, and being in communion with people. And I was scared to death to go there. Scared to death. I couldn't actually believe I was going to walk into some place and ask them for those services, like, can you give me clean needles, and can you show me how to do this without destroying my arm? I couldn't believe I was going to ask someone that question, and they were going to treat me with respect. So I walked in, and I met Joanne. And Joanne she became my point of contact. She became my worker there. And it blew my mind. It was a spiritual experience, because the whole time I was there, She didn't ask me, well, don't you want to stop using? She didn't ask me that once. Her heart was open. She knew where I was. She met me where I was. Now, when somebody walks into the MHA in that condition, I have to make a decision. Do I want to talk to them about harm reduction? Or do I want to lead with my fear and say, hey, you need to stop using. Look how sick you are. I have to make that choice. It's a conscious effort. And when I do it, it opens my heart. And just like Joanne modeled a relationship of an open heart, of loving me unconditionally, of giving me clean needles that were going to help me in so many ways, teaching me how to take care of my veins, giving me food and Gatorade every time I showed up. That was the foundation of my recovery that brought me back here to Jamestown about 2 years later, after that. So at the MHA, when we're working together and when we're in our staff meetings, we're always talking about this. Keeping an open heart, meeting people where they're at, engaging in harm reduction. And you know what? Harm reduction isn't something that we need to just keep within the realm of substance use disorder. Harm reduction could work within our relationships that aren't always where we would like them to be. I sometimes get frustrated beyond belief with my partner Roosevelt because we're not at that place we need to be with having all of the rooms in the house painted before Christmas. And that's intense stuff, right? It is for me. And I can get angry and say, we're not making any progress, what are we gonna do? And talk about frustration. But honestly, okay, Stephen, think about harm reduction. Roosevelt, how about after church today? Let's go up and get the newest and most updated paint samples so we can finally decide on the color. And I'm being silly and I'm being kind of funny, but in one sense, I'm not. Because while we do that working with people who have substance use issues, we can do that in our lives here. And that can help us go through this period of time that is more contentious, I think, than any period of time I remember. So that relationship that I started with Joanne 13 years ago has allowed me to reach a point where I have a long period of continually not using. And I'm the executive director of the Mental Health Association. So let me point that out. I was a homeless IV drug user. And I've been able to get to the point of the executive director. And you know what? Yes, some of that I did do myself, like I got up every morning and showed up. But I did all of that through relationships with other people, with connection to other people. And that's how recovery saved my life. And that's how recovery works, and it will work. And I hope after today, and I step down from here, you'll be able to take with you the lessons that Joanne taught to me, to meet people where they're at, to open your heart, to listen, and to love everyone. Amen.